Got super steady on the S10, which is going to downsample it to 1080p. We're going to do the same test here. What's up, guys? Welcome back. So today we stacked the Galaxy S10 Plus against the Pixel 3 XL, and this is running Android Q. So I've got the latest updates on here from Android Q, and I want to see, does that improve anything? Are there any notable differences between the two phones? We're starting here with the front-facing cameras. So on the left, you're going to see the Galaxy S10. On the right, we've got the Pixel. We're going to do some outdoor examples today. We're going to do some HDR tests. Mostly video focused, but I've got a good amount of photos too we're gonna take a look at side by side. One thing right up front I wanna call out is the fact that the selfie mode on the S10 is gonna be a mirror image. So yes, I could have fixed this in post, but by default, that's what it's gonna do. So you'll notice in a few scenes when we're using the selfie camera, it's actually rotating the opposite way as the Pixel. I can tell you initially, I've been very impressed with the S10 and what it's been able to produce. However, the Pixel just does a great job with the software it has. So let's find out, does it come with any updates in Android Q? Does the S10 continue to beat it? How do they do outdoors? How do they do with video? How's the audio sound, the picture quality, and most importantly, which one do you want to carry in your pocket? So let's go find out, see some examples, and have some fun. All right, so what we're doing in this scene is gonna take a look at the overall HDR and exposure. So we're looking at a pretty bright area, however, there is some cloud cover, so we do have a little bit of a softbox going on. But overall, how does the exposure look between the two? Can you see more details in the video right now out of the S10, or is the Pixel holding up pretty well? All right, so as we walk towards our next scene, one thing to keep in mind is having the three lenses on the S10 is a huge advantage because ultimately you can capture so much more. So let's take a look quickly before we hop to the next scene at some example photos where we're gonna use both the telephoto, the regular lens, and then actually the ultra wide lens as well. So you can just see, whether you're on an airplane, whether you're traveling, maybe you're just capturing a landscape or a room, how much more you can really get in sight by going to that ultra wide lens. So for me, it's a huge add-on. It's a huge value to have. Unfortunately, the Pixel doesn't have it, so we can't see it there. It does have the wider front-facing camera, which we also see on the S10, even though it's doing just software cropping on the S10. The Pixel does offer you that ultra-wide front-facing, which is nice, but I think moving forward, all cameras should really include the rear-facing ultra-wide because it's proven so useful. All right, so we're using the rear-facing cameras now on both. We're gonna start off on 4K 30. That way you get a side-by-side comparison between the two, which both are natively gonna do 4K 30. Then we'll try out the super steady mode as well as 4K 60, which doesn't have stabilization on the S10, and we'll compare all four next to each other. So we're gonna start off walking here, and then we're gonna speed up a little bit. 4K 30. Really fast near the end. Got super steady on the S10, which is going to downsample it to 1080p. We're going to do the same test here. Just jog through and see how the stabilization looks. All right, so let's talk about the wide angle on here real quick. It is really meant to be used where you're a little bit farther from your subject. I took a funny picture here of my dog just so you can see an example. So what I did is I originally shot with the normal camera, and then I actually held it really close to her face and used the wide angle just to show you guys either you can get some funny shots, but if you are very close to a subject, it is going to distort it a bit with the wide angle lens as you'd normally expect. So even though the phone's done so amazing, I do want to call out a few flaws which I've noticed. And number one being that this guy really likes to oversaturate. It's not as noticeable in normal everyday shots, but when you have very vivid colors like the sunset in this example, it's just so overblown orange. It didn't look like that at all in real life. I appreciate the fact they want to make the images look a little bit better because it's a cell phone. They maybe assume that you're not going to edit it yourself. However, these are just unusable because of how orange they turned out. So take a look. Just be aware you do have some instances where the S10's definitely going to oversaturate the images and make it look fake or unreal. The other thing to note is that the portrait mode kind of sucks on the S10. I personally don't use it a lot, so I'm not a great example for this, but when I try to use it for certain objects and in general even people, I've seen that it doesn't do the best subject isolation. So when you take a look at this sign, I mean, you can see the grass, you can see the trees, you can see the plants here. It just didn't do a great job selecting that sign. Now, granted, that's not a person, so it may work a little bit better with a real person. It's not something I use a lot, and I do find that compared to the Pixel and the iPhone, even if you're not shooting a person, these still do a pretty good job at isolating subjects within portrait mode. So not its strongest point, but about everywhere else, I think this has been a great experience so far. So another thing to be aware of is the overall audio quality. I recorded the other day when I was down here. It was really windy, so let's clip over to that footage now and see how both mics deal with a lot of wind noise. And then we'll do a similar test, a little more detailed today now that it's less windy, to see how the audio quality sounds. All right, so one of the big advantages with the S10 over the Pixel 3 is going to be the amount of lenses it has. We can do things like this super wide shot right now. We can also do telephoto. So I want to give you a reference of A to B. So we got some people playing in the park here. We just switched to the telephoto on the Samsung. Me do a similar level of zoom over on the Pixel. So as you can see, they both picked up a lot of wind noise. I don't know if one was specifically better than the other. That's really your own judgment. I think maybe the S10 had the edge up, but overall I was pretty impressed with the audio quality out of both, considering how much wind was present. So what we're gonna do now is a similar audio test, but we're gonna rotate the cameras because we found as you change direction, the audio quality may increase or decrease. So right now we are using the rear-facing cameras and we're just doing a 360-degree spin. All right, now we flip to the front-facing cameras and we're gonna do the same test. So we're just gonna gently spin them around here while we're also talking, see how the audio levels change. You would think right now would be quiet and then it should be getting louder as we flip back around to our face. So how'd they stack up? Was the audio better out of one than the other? I know the Pixel got a big improvement in January when they updated it. However, the S10, from what I've seen out of the box, has been pretty good as well. So audio quality test, who wins? So overall, wrapping up thoughts on the S10, it's definitely the best camera phone I've used to date. I haven't used the P30 Pro, so I don't have a reference of that quite yet. I hope to in the future. But when you look at the video quality of this, the audio quality that comes out of that, the formats it can shoot in, the fact that you have 3 different lenses, it's really a complete package and it takes great photos. Other than the oversaturation and the portrait issues, which I previously mentioned, everything else day to day, this is the best camera I've used, and that wide angle is just so useful in the real world. So I'm very happy they included that, and I hope all phones moving forward do as well. The fact that you can record UHD from the front-facing cameras as well, you've got 4K 30, 4K 60, and the steady shot mode out of the rear cameras just gives you a lot of options depending on what you want to shoot. The picture quality itself is great. It has built-in variable aperture, so when you're shooting in daylight, you can get the frame rates right. Overall, they've just really put a lot of attention into this camera, and for me, it gets a big thumbs up. And I personally find, in most use cases, not 100%, it does take better shots than the Pixel, which we stacked it up against today. I've got the Sony RX0 Mark II getting delivered this week, so I'm gonna do a review of that. Maybe we'll stack it up here against the S10. I also wanna throw that against the GoPro and the Osmo. So stay tuned, guys. As always, it's been a pleasure having you, and I'll see you in the next video.